I'm going to get started then. Thanks everyone for joining us. This is Jyotsna Khan with Tyrannosaurus Tech, and we also have Santiago here with us. He'll tell you more about himself. But first, I just wanted to, get started, tell you a little bit about Tyrannosaurus Tech, why we're doing this. So essentially, we are a software development company here in Atlanta. I'm guessing a lot of you are local as well. A majority of our clients tend to be in Atlanta, though we do work with a lot of clients all over the US. And like I mentioned, we are a custom software development company. So we mainly focus on a lot of mobile or web applications. We also do a lot of UI, UX, design work, prototyping sometimes, MVPs with entrepreneurs, startups, some technology consulting as well, and even WordPress marketing websites. But the core focus is mainly web and mobile apps. And in short, we're just a team of super shop developers, designers, and we help entrepreneurs use technology to solve complex solutions and create great and easy to use products. So a little bit about our drivers and basically what gets us out of the bed every morning. As I mentioned, we're a team of developers, so we really thrive on solving complex and big problems using technology. We're also a design-first company, so we really believe, creating easy to use, intuitive, sticky products. That's really, the essence of product development, and that's why, like I said, one of the reasons why we think this topic is super important. We also help and mentor a lot of entrepreneurs in Atlanta, and we have a lot of meetups like Tyrannosaurus Tech Meetup, Latinos in Tech Meetup, and we do a lot of events here for entrepreneurs, designers, developers on various different topics. So if there's anything specific that you'd like to learn more about, hear more about, feel free to reach out to us, and we'd love to, have the next webinar or the next event on that session. Of course, like I said, we've been pretty fortunate as well to be, considered a top custom software development company here in Atlanta. And we have a lot of reviews that you can check out on Clutch. So, our reviews speak for themselves, and we believe in working very closely with our clients and making sure that, we're really delivering what they're looking for. And finally, just to give you a sense of, the type of clients we work with, they're across the entire spectrum. So we work with everyone from, large enterprise clients like Porsche. We work for Ticket Alternative, to smaller mid-sized businesses, to nonprofits like Ron Clark Academy, Task Force of Global Health. We've also worked with some startups here in Atlanta. Some of them you might not have heard of, but some of them like Gather and Sidekick, they're mainly, decently funded by now, so you might have heard of some of those. So yeah, just like I said, this is just a little bit about Tyrannosaurus Tech and what we do here. And now we'll jump into, the main topic that Santiago will tell you more about. So yeah, I'll just pass presenter role here.
So my name is Santiago Gomez. I've been in this industry about 15 years. So I want to be very thankful to Tyrannosaurus Tech for having me on. I work with them pretty exclusively doing UX and UI development and design for all their clients. We partner a lot doing everything from straight UX research and development workshops and visual design as well. Perfect. So design for emotion, how good UX can drive engagement and conversions. How this really started was working with a lot of different partners and clients in Atlanta and figuring out some of the shortcomings they have and some of the things we were diving into that seemed to come up again and again throughout our process. So a little bit of background on me. I've been designing for about 15 years, and I have some development experience as well. I'm also a professor of UX and product design at Clemson University. I go up there once a week and teach a course there. And over my 15 years, I've developed and designed around 100, a little over 100 applications and websites. So we're companies like AT&T, Coca-Cola, Delta, LG, Home Depot, and IHG. So to get started, the real goal of UX in business is to improve customer satisfaction, loyalty through utility, ease of use, and pleasure providing in the interaction with a product. You know, that's a really large scheme, but to me, what really means is that through the process of user experience and just doing good user research, you're basically creating a better experience for any user that uses your application or website. The interaction is very important. To me, it's always this mix of pleasurable to just a great enhancement experience for them as they dive through your product. I've dealt with different clients who've had different needs in the solution. Some of them have been where they just can't get customers to go through the whole process and even put anything in a cart. Some have come to the point where they're just trying to get their utility, their application to really work in enhancing something within their company. If it's filling out, security, and doing customer service, anything that might happen within the company, and using user experience to enhance those for their internal employees as well. So Aaron Walter's a really great user experience designer, and one of his books, Designing for Emotions, really been impactful in my life. But why do we settle for usable when we can make these interfaces both usable and pleasurable? That really hits home. I think we've all used applications that have been, easy to use, may not look the best, or the opposite, where they look great, but they're really hard to use. It's getting that right balance that makes the experience really, really great for the user. So when you're designing for emotion, there are really three key features: is your visceral, behavioral, and reflective. These come into play a lot. I think a lot of companies now are really trying to focus on all three, but there are times where I think the visceral takes over, and for good reason. I think sometimes it comes down to where we can build a really great behavior. We've got good performance thanks to our development team, but we need to look really sharp and really good because at the end result, maybe the users that the demo that we're heading toward needs that to close the deal. So working with your team, it's really important to basically focus these three pieces. I think the reflective is really, really important early on. By doing good user research, by good user questions and testing, you're going to come out and really find out what makes them feel great using your product, or what their feeling is and what they're trying to get out of the product. And then building the other two off of that tend to be where I focus more. Is once I have the reflective down really well, working on the behavioral and also then the visceral is really important as well. So why is UX important to you and your business? This always comes up a lot. I deal with a lot of clients that are new to UX or new to the understanding what UX can bring to their company. The next slide will basically go over some of the high level, but I think it comes down to we're in a different day and age than we used to be. Our users really want more out of whatever app they open. I can tell you, I've done a lot of research, and depending on the demo, I mean, if the app isn't feeling good to them, looking good to them early on, they'll never open it again. And that's huge, especially if you're working from B2C. If it's B2B, it's really working on how to make it not only feel great, but easy to use for those internal employees that want to use it or have to use it over and over again. Make that pleasurable so it's not a task or a chore to use. So some of the ROI. This is a pretty distinctive list. I mean, if you've ever done UX before or been around UX, this pretty much will hit home. Higher user conversions, higher, customer engagement, customer loyalty, decrease of abandonment, less calls for customer service, increased usage, and save for development time. These always hit home to me because I think the top two that really always come up in our conversations is less calls to customer service for any company, because that's, hours, that's time and money and resources, and the higher customer engagement. With these two bigger ones, you'll find that if you can get those right, the conversions kind of follow. The customer loyalty will also follow. And the increased usage. Saving development time is something we'll get into a little later in the slides, but that's one key feature that I don't think a lot of companies look at, which is if you get down and start doing all the work early in your design phase, you're going to save a lot more money and time in development because you're focusing on the bugs early on. You're focusing on any flow issues early on, so you're not having to eat that time in development. So startups, B2Bs, and B2Cs. What happens when a company team ignores or overlooks UX? So this I always find kind of funny. And I find it funny because I don't think anyone tries to personally or purposely ignore UX. But I think it's hard when you don't understand it. Sometimes a lot of companies have a set goal in mind. Sometimes they put a hard date on something for many reasons. It could be we have a big convention coming up and we want to demonstrate this, or we have a client that we want to sign and we need to put some date to it so that we can close this deal. All those things are really important, but then what happens is you don't always take the time to really define requirements early on. There's a lot of transparency issues between the end up stakeholders' needs and developers. Sometimes they're just given a date, but they're not given the reason why, or they're not understood the reasons that are going to implicate how much time is going to take for development to actually succeed. Stakeholder politics can lead development instead of user needs. This is give and take. Like, I think that happens in every company. I think you kind of start off with your business need, and then you kind of jump into the user needs, which isn't always wrong. It's just how some businesses are run. The end result is we need to twist those around. Once you get your business needs involved, it's good to let everyone know what those are, especially user experience, either your person who's doing user experience and research or your team itself in total. That way they can start driving the user toward those needs and then figure out if those needs actually will work with the users. And that's where the user research really comes involved, in doing user testing, doing prototyping early on really helps lead those two directions in the same path. Otherwise, you're going to find you hit some really big roadblocks early on. Less conversions is a big one. Loss of customer loyalty, abandonment, user errors, all these things kind of happen when you kind of pull user experience out of it. And that happens it's natural. You have stakeholder needs and wants, you have budget concerns, and sometimes those all will impact your development and your UX. Those are things that we need to define early on so that you can, if you need to streamline your UX and go lean, if you need to, do things differently so that you can still get to a successful endpoint or launch to your application. How to get the most ROI from user experience. So I've gone over these before. It's the same list, but I really want to hit on some big points, and I think I hit them earlier on too, is it really does come down to these factors. I think these really hit home. Is higher conversions, decrease abandonment, less cost for customer service, and saving development time are probably the top four. And I find those are led by user research, stakeholder interviews, defined requirements, user-centered design. All those things kind of put in play. Increased usage, I did highlight because of two reasons. It depends on the application. Some applications, B2C, you definitely want to increase usage. You want people signing on, and if it's a product that they're purchasing or a product they're using to pay for. Sometimes on B2B, it's not just increased usage, it's just something they're going to end up using, but you really want them to have a lot less decrease in abandonment. You want less calls or less asks to, let's say, if not customer service, your development team to do fixes, and you want to save in development time. And these things kind of rotate and go with each other. I find that and it's something you try not to be too general. Each team, each company has their own needs and wants. I think you always start with the basics and you always kind of build off of that. Some teams don't need a ton of user research. Some teams may need a minimal amount of that and more into really driving into A/B testing early with prototyping. If it's the stakeholders are the users because it's a B2B product that they're going to be manually using, example being accounting software, or something going on with a team that has to fulfill a need through a CMS. I mean, there's tons of different reasons and whys, but that really helps define it early on by just using your basics, and then driving through these pieces as you go through will help clarify not only what you're building, how you're building, but in where you can save money and time. This is so that depending on the project, there are key pieces within UX. And I go back to it. The budget and time is huge. I'm very realistic. Every client's different. Not every client is an AT&T or a Home Depot or a Delta. And making sure you align yourself with those pieces even before you start the project help a lot. I think information architecture is really big for me. Competitive analysis is really big if you're doing anything that's B2C. But if you follow these, user research should always be the beginning. And the user research can be many different things to many different people. it can be, like I said, you're sitting down with stakeholders and really getting information from them because they're the end user, or going out and finding out the right demo, going through researching, either doing questionnaires or different tactics in analyzing what it is you're trying to get to at the end. Information architecture is awesome. And what's great is I don't tend to do this alone. I tend to bring a solution architect. I tend to bring developers involved and stakeholders and really break down what we end up having to build. The competitive analysis is great because it really levels out what you're trying to succeed in and where other competitors can be doing it great, how you can take those pieces and bring them into your project. Wireframing to me and prototyping are one and one. I think some people do wireframing and don't do the clickable prototyping, which I think we're moving away from. But that's really, really important because you're going to save so much time and money if you can prototype it, even if it's in like something like InVision, and have somebody go test through it heavily. Stakeholders, do your users, when you're doing user questions, have them run through it. Ask them questions as they're going through, the prototype. Get feedback, natural feedback, that they just automatically get to a point and have something to say. All those things and key pieces make for a better product and also save you money in the end result because you're doing it early on when it's a lot less expensive than you've developed this whole product and you're having to redo functionality. UI and visual design, I think, it's the icing on the cake in some people's eyes. I think it's also just as important as wireframing and prototyping. I think the visual can make or break a product very quickly. Branding is huge for most companies. I've seen companies who have done smartly done things differently, where they may have branding as just their logo, but they're maybe whitelisting the product in the future, so they go with something very simple that they can always turn around and change for each client. And analytics, I don't put that at the bottom for any particular reason. Analytics to me is great if a product's already living and live. It's hard. Websites, I say it's huge. I say applications that have been out in the public or have had analytics built into them with one fashion or another. It's really helpful early on because you can see where those breakpoints are and where the pain points are. But when you don't have that in play, it's really great to throw out an MVP. So after your first MVP launch and everything's great, by version 2, you've got some real analytics to play with that kind of can match your user research or can put you in another direction. But it's really great to have it. It's really strong to have it in your arsenal. So there's a couple different types of UX methodologies. These two particular reign pretty quick with me. Lean is where I tried to do, and I'll tell you why. Working as a small company and working as partners with other companies, I find that Lean is way closer to their budget. Agile is great for companies like AT&T, Delta, Home Depot, any of these bigger companies that have really set sprints and they can really define those deliverables as they go across. And their cost is really scoped in those sprints. Where you have, I'll give you an example. I have clients that call me and say, hey, I only have 30 hours of time. What can I get out of this? And it's really cool when I can give them a lot more than they were able to get from their internal team because of how the sprint cadence was. Or I'm just coming in there and doing, I'm getting research, I'm rapid prototyping. I've turned prototypes around in 48 hours. I'm iterating really quick with them in a meeting. I throw up the prototype and I'm either, sketching the changes right away. I'm opening an application and doing the changes with them and going through iteration after iteration and getting it just the way they think is right to go test in front of users. So the delivery is really fast. You get quick customer feedback right away, and it's fully transparent. You're working directly with the issues in front of them. You're not in a hole working through something to show at some meeting in 2 weeks. Nothing wrong with Agile. I think it's a process that can be great for some companies because naturally they may be too busy to do it at such a quick, lean rate. And it's really, I think it's schedule controlled, which again is great. Some companies like AT&T are really big and they have some of the stakeholders are in meetings all week long. So it's hard to get a hold of them until that set meeting date. Bring your customers to the forefront of your application's intent with UX methods and with the ideology of fail fast. Iterate fast before you dive heavy into development. This really goes into lean. I believe in fail fast. I rather sit in front of a client and work through the issues and figure out what we're doing wrong, what's not working in their current application, or what's currently that we maybe prototyped out that isn't working, and just making changes quickly than waiting till something gets in development later on because we just okayed this path and then having to redo it. I mean, that's really, really costly. And most companies that do heavy development, somewhere between 20 or 30% of their cost in development is just fixing things that could have been fixed early on in design. So simple rules that produce great ROI. Ease of use, meet user expectations, align your user with your business goals. These things are pretty straightforward. I mean, these are things that you should be walking into any application, regardless of UX or not, hoping for. User experience design before development is important. It comes at a much lower cost than having to fix mistakes during or after development, which I think I've talked about a few times already. I think ease of use, standalone, is probably my number one. I've done applications that look okay. There's either super simple or we didn't have a ton of time to design as far as the visuals concerned, but the use was so great that didn't hear anything in the application. And even sometimes in version 2, we may have gone back and done visual fixes, but we were able to get to a really usable product that was able to generate revenue or even do whatever it is the client necessarily needed it to do internally or externally. And those expectations being met are huge, not only by the client, but the user. Something that I wish more clients were to really align the user with their business goals. Every business has business goals. I'm not one of those evangelists that think, oh, user experience over everything. I think that's 100% true at certain points, but the end business goal is what drives someone paying my bill. So when generating revenue from the application, someone being able to keep working with me or with any UXer. Because at the end of the day, those business goals probably align with some type of budgetary need. If it's revenue driven, if it's maybe a new client, I mean, all these things need to take place and have an understanding so that in your process, you're building out toward those goals. But that's a big one. I think most companies need to have be way more transparent with it and have a better way of using it within their user experience team. It's always going to be less expensive to do design, iterate on that design, and prototype that design using a prototype tool. It helps to get your team aligned and working closely with your users, makes your mistakes in the design process instead of having to pull back a new feature to redesign, redevelop, and relaunch. So one of the big things I wanted to speak about in this talk is, I've been seeing this over and over again in the last, I would say heavily in the last 8 years. Whereas companies are driving into UX, they pick and choose the pieces they want to use. And some of it makes sense. But keeping some type of process, aligning that up with your team. And at the end of the day, if you can get enough of the prototyping done early on in design, you're going to save yourself so much more money. And that's really what it comes down to. Everybody's in a business to make some type of money or to make a change in something. Even if you're a nonprofit and you're just trying to help people, making whatever that is easier for your users always going to be better than having to have them do something that takes 18 click events. Little things like that are huge. And I really wanted to focus that on this talk, is making sure that people understand user experience is a very beneficial tool early on and throughout the process. But early on, it really helps companies get to a point where they understand their product better, they understand where their product's going, and when they go sit down with their development team, it's not such of a black box. And for UXers, I really want to emphasize this: get your development team involved early. I have found more success working directly with my developers, asking them questions, getting their feedback, not just stakeholders, because a lot of times developers will tell you if something is going to be a technical debt that they may not want to put on. I'd rather hear that early on in the process than when we're starting to already develop the product. And with that, thank you guys so much. You can find me on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and I have my own company called monsterlabs.com. And I really want to thank Tyrannosaurus Tech for allowing me to be on today. Thanks.
Yeah, I guess we'll see if anyone has any questions. Feel free to, ask it here and then we can address that. I don't see anything yet. Might be a few minutes to see something come in. You can also, of course, send us questions. Okay, I see Eric would like to speak. Eric, do you have a question? Okay. Eric? Okay. I don't know what happened, but he raised his hand and then he disappeared. So, yeah, again, feel free to add the question in the questions box that you see. You can also send it to me, afterwards, and we'll connect. Okay, I think there's one question here. Amazing studio. Does UX Express require cool studios like that? Do you see the question, Santiago?
I don't see the question. It's not coming up on my screen, but tell me the question again.
Okay. Do UX? Oh, okay. He likes your studio, so uh, he's asking if UX experts require studios like yours.
As far as having clients, I'm a little confused by the question. So are you asking if companies need a studio like mine or
I
UXers
guess
work in a studio?
UXers need um, studios like yours.
It's fun to have. um,
Sure.
I get to have a fun studio. So yeah, thank you for asking that question. You can tell I'm a huge comic geek and sci-fi guy, but I would say I turn around very little. I'm always looking at my computers and working. And luckily, I really love my office. I got no issues with it at all.
I guess if you spend a lot of time, you better like it,
Yeah,
right?
I
So,
basically live in my wife
yeah.
calls it the bat cave. Live in this thing.
For sure. Um, I guess if we till we see some more questions come in, maybe talking about are there any resources here in Atlanta that you would like to share about, dedicated towards UI UX, or maybe anything online that you follow that gives you, good information on design? Anything that you'd like to point out?
Yeah, sure. I follow a lot of people on Medium. I also am on a couple LinkedIn groups. I go to a few meetups in town. I'm actually going to start a meetup called, UX OTP. I'm trying to be out of the perimeter because I live outside of it. So I'm trying to build a UX group outside of the perimeter. There's a ton in the city. You can look up on meetups. I've gone to a few different
Started
ones.
that yet, or you plan to?
Say again?
Have you started it, or you plan to?
Oh, I plan to in the new year. It's kind of a rough time right now, in the holidays and everything to get everybody together. But I was thinking like the second week of January to do our first meeting. I've already got a couple people involved and including a business that's going to hopefully, donate some time and money to hosting.
Mhm.
Um, I think there's a funny part. So I teach at Clemson and I drive up every Thursday to go do a class. And I find that my resources are always changing and my UX in general, I hate to say opinion, it flows because of new research coming out, because of new products that I'm seeing that are hitting the market that are affecting a different user group that it's when I deal with younger kids and I see the products they're using, it makes me rethink a lot of my hard opinions. Um, I'm not a big Snapchat fan, never been, but these kids can use it to an extent that I could never, play with it. And that UI to me is horrible. So those things like I have to always take in part that I may follow some Medium articles. I may even just through my experience, and I do a lot of applications. I say in a year I probably do somewhere between 30. This
Mhm.
year alone, I think I've worked on about 30 applications. And my experience with application one at the beginning of the year till now is really different. We worked with the Ron Clark Academy with Tyrannosaurus Tech. And even that experience was huge because it didn't follow a lot of the standardized best practices for UX, but that group and what they've built and the type of experience that they're trying to produce, which is very, um, if anybody's watched Harry Potter, there's the house driven where you have, Hogwarts and all these other houses. They do something similar for their students, and they've seen such a great life-changing events for these students by doing this, that in the urban youth that they specialize with. But a lot of the way they do the experience is completely backwards from what we're used to. So building a UI, mobile, and even web friendly that focused on what their needs were, and that means really, really heavy graphical UI. Not always the best events, but these events matter to the teachers and to the admins that are there. That was really great to figure out, and it wasn't at all wrong. It was just the practice of what they've successfully done within their business that I had to take a step back and say, okay, for me to be better with them, I need to understand them first, and then take a step back and try to bring in best practices. That was probably the hardest part of learning throughout the years, that I can read a million articles, I can go to a million meetups, but everybody's experience is different. Every company's experience is different. I think I tell a lot of my students that graduated and gone off to jobs in New York and California. I've got a couple of really big tech companies now that we talk a good bit. We have a Slack channel that we all kind of still talk on, and they all say the truth that the mediums and the articles don't always help. It's sitting down and figuring out the problem in front of me that makes me stronger, and failing at those problems and then turning around and making a solution out of it. I think failing fast is huge. I wish it was more of a standardized thing where people are like, okay, let's go see what we can do. And even if we get it wrong early on in the processes, we can turn around and make it better.
Sounds good. Um, I think someone is asking if you could share the presentation.
Yeah.
We would be sharing the video. So this is being recorded, so you could watch this again. I think that should be good enough, and that would have the slides as well. Um, there's also someone asking, what's the number one tip on getting a sponsor on board?
Um, as far as the UX meetups or in general,
Yeah, I don't really understand the question of like, what kind of sponsor are you looking for, Fahim?
as far as UX meetups, I'm usually looking for someone who can either lend us a space, or either if they have a space, sometimes give us some food, like water and chips usually work. It's more the space, like just give me a space where we can meet, after hours. Most of these meetups have to happen around 7 in the afternoon because a lot of people drive into the city for work and then come home out and outside the perimeter. So that's usually a big sponsorship, just to be able to open your doors after hours.
Cool. There's another question here. What are your thoughts on best languages for future UI or web app development?
Oh God, that's always a good one. Um, I'll give you a little scenario. So I worked on an application recently that was done in Laravel with PHP, only because of the requirements that their dev team only knew PHP. It worked out really great. We were able to finish the project. It's about to go live. But now that there's an investor involved, compared to the person, and this happens a lot. There's a startup or single person who just wants to build an app, and they have a very limited budget. So how do you best get the most for their budget? Some technologies cost more, some don't. It's the base truth. And if you build with developers that may give you a discount to work in what they know, it helps. Being agnostic is great, but it does help. So with that in mind, when we turned around and started going through this investor, and we just did a whole workshop on it, I think React is really huge. There's a big stakeholder in the technology space right now for React. I still work with a lot with Angular developers working in Angular 8. I don't think one is better than the other. I think it's really what team works better in it and what's more cost effective with your team. As far as backends, right now with an API layer, they can be agnostic. I do a lot of SQL as far as backends are concerned with teams. Um, and that all changes. I mean, data is getting more and more intense. I would like to say, as far as UI and front end, React is where I would head if you want to go code. I'm no by far not a great React developer. I do mostly views and building components, but I would say that React is taking up a lot of the space out there. You find way more work with React.
Yep, I guess that's what we specialize in as well. Um, I think that's about all the questions. I don't see anything else come in. Again, like I said, feel free to send your questions later, and then if we can get Santiago to respond back and answer some of that, we'll definitely do that. We'll also share this recording so you have information on the video. You can watch the video again, and of course, you can always reach out to Tyrannosaurus Tech for anything. Yeah, I guess we'll stop then. Thanks, Santiago, and thanks everyone for joining us today. And we hope to see you again at our next session.
Thanks, guys.